Good morning, everyone. I'm Selma Roosevelt, the Chief of Protocol, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you here today to the swearing in of Edward J. Perkins as Ambassador to South Africa. We're very privileged this morning to have the Secretary of State to officiate at this ceremony, and also delighted to have with Mr. Perkins his wife, Lucy, his daughters, Sarah and Catherine, his mother, Mrs. Holmes, who's known as Tiny. And did I miss someone?
I missed this. Mrs. Walker is my high school counselor.
And Mrs. Walker, his high school counselor. Particularly like to give a welcome to the South African ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Bukes, and his wife. First order of business will be the administration of the oath. I, Edward Joseph Perkins, do solemnly swear
I, Edward Joseph Perkins, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
and without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
on which I'm about to enter.
on which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
These ceremonies, which a person is sworn in to serve the United States, are always special occasions. And there is a kind of breadth to it. The other day, I went over to the White House and I watched a new Chief Justice of the United States sworn in and an Associate Justice. And not long before that, in the White House, because it was cold outdoors, I saw the President and Vice President sworn in. And many of us in this room, all with the same oath, a very serious and compelling one, and I think never more meaningfully than this morning with Ed Perkins. Ernest Hemingway described courage as grace under pressure. I'm happy today to be present at the swearing in of a truly courageous professional diplomat as our next ambassador to South Africa, Ed Perkins. Apparently you have a few supporters around, Ed. I think this is the biggest crowd we've ever had here for one of these swearings in. I can think of no more difficult ambassadorial assignment than the one Ed is undertaking, and I can think of no finer person for this demanding position than Ambassador Perkins. As a football player in Portland, Oregon, as a member of the armed services, first as an enlisted man in the U.S. Army, and later in my own branch, the Marine Corps, he demonstrated the fortitude that has sustained him through his life of public service. From his parents, I suspect, he acquired the respect for hard work, which, together with his innate ability, has underlay his academic success. For he is not only Mr. Perkins and Ambassador Perkins, but Dr. Perkins. It's not an honorary doctorate. He earned it. I should have said he did it the old-fashioned way. But above all, it is his sense of integrity that has sustained him and earned him the admiration of his American colleagues and foreign leaders alike. Ed Perkins has met many challenges. Most recently, as ambassador to Liberia, he occupied a position unique in the Foreign Service. Our relations with Liberia are extremely intimate. We also expect a great deal of each other, and both sides, to say nothing of our press and Congress, are prone to fault the ambassador when performance on either side falls short of these expectations. But whether in lengthy sessions with senior Liberian officials or in the halls of our own Congress, Ed Perkins has withstood criticism and Monday morning quarterbacking to keep his enormous energy focused on furthering U.S. national interests, preserving strategic facilities, and attending to the conditions of confined opponents of the regime. Ed Perkins is a magnetically capable Foreign Service officer. He is a pro. His next assignment requires courage and moral strength. South Africa is a deeply divided society undergoing a historic transition, one that simply must conclude soon in the end of apartheid, the establishment of a truly democratic society, and the reemergence of a dynamic and growing economy. South Africa's polarization makes it difficult even for South Africans to talk to each other. And it makes it difficult for those who support the goals I enumerated, and this is true of U.S. diplomacy, to help South Africans reach across this divide. Pressures from all of the many sides will tear at Ambassador Perkins, as each demands, in a sense, total U.S. support. It is this noisy divisiveness in South Africa that means our diplomacy there is conducted in a minefield. It will take a man of Ed Perkins' strength to keep U.S. diplomacy aimed resolutely at its goals when so many will be trying to twist our arm, warp our message, or manipulate our efforts. The U.S. role in South Africa has recently been the subject of an intense debate in our own country. That debate ended with the overriding of the President's veto of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986. There are at least two important points I want to make about that debate. First, it was about the means of our policy, not the ends. The principles on which our policy must rest are essentially shared by all concerned in the Congress and the administration, however much we may have disagreed about tactics. Stronger sanctions against South Africa are now the law of the land, and we are implementing that law. The second point is that the debate is now over. A festering debate that had become a distraction from the real issues can now be set aside. For better or for ill, punitive sanctions are a fact. We intend now to proceed with our diplomacy. It is time to raise our eyes once again to the horizon and to move ahead. In the course of our national debate, I remembered the old adage that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. In South Africa, we've been getting a lot of experience lately. Events have not been going the way that the overwhelming majority of South Africans would want them to go. In the end, it is South Africans who will decide their country's future. Our role is to help create conditions that will draw people of goodwill, the overwhelming majority of South Africans, together. For this reason, our policy must continue to emphasize our principles as a people. We do not and cannot aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, or our favorites in South Africa. Such an intrusion would be unjustified and unwise for any outside party. Yet we cannot be timid about stating our goals. Otherwise, we would fall short of our own deeply held convictions. Nor can we fail to adjust our policy to changing circumstances on the ground in South and Southern Africa. We will concentrate on the critical question in this and all foreign policy arenas, not only what do we want, but how, practically, we can get from here to there. Ambassador Perkins' reporting will get my personal attention and that of the President. His reporting and his analysis will help us chart our course in the period ahead as we make decisions about how to reach our goals.
Mr. Secretary, Ambassador Bucas and Mrs. Bucas, Acting Assistant Secretary Freeman, other notables, including Mayor Washington and Mrs. Washington, friends and members of the Foreign Service and the Department of State, distinguished guests. My family and I are very grateful to you, Mr. Secretary, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today and for your exceedingly generous remarks. I want to thank you and President Reagan for the confidence you've shown by appointing me as the United States Ambassador to the Republic of South Africa. On this very special day, I would like to introduce my family, my wife Lucy, my mother, my two daughters, and my wife's brothers and sisters who are scattered throughout the audience, and one cousin whom I've known for a long time. I also want to pay special tribute today to Mrs. Carmen Walker, my high school counselor and a key influence in my decision to enter foreign affairs. I thank all of you for honoring me and my family with your presence. Mr. Secretary, I am known as a better listener than a speaker, but I cannot allow this occasion to pass without acknowledging the unstinting support of colleagues in the department, in the Foreign Service, around the country, and indeed throughout the world as I take up this especially challenging assignment. I am deeply indebted to you, to Deputy Secretary Whitehead, and to the senior leadership of the Department of State for the assistance and support given me. This support reflects the widespread concern among all Americans for the future of the country in which I am about to serve. In the same vein, I wish to give special recognition to my predecessor, Ambassador Herman Nichol and Mrs. Nichol, who served with distinction for 4.5 difficult years as our country's envoys to South Africa. My appreciation also goes to the Senate for the very evident bipartisan support shown me. I see the President's appointment of me as an honor not just for me, but for the Foreign Service. It is a recognition of our professionalism and of our loyalty to the elected administration which we serve. The purpose of today's ceremony is to witness my passage from one mission for the President and the American people to another. But it seems to me that this occasion is more than that. It is another step forward for America, both here and in South Africa. Americans should be proud of our willingness to remain involved in difficult issues and difficult situations. America's involvement in South Africa is an honorable undertaking, one that reflects what we stand for. All Americans share the same goals. The American people have forcefully expressed their abhorrence of apartheid and their desire for a foreign policy that works to facilitate peaceful change in South Africa. Such expressions in our pluralistic society have come in many forms. from the President, from the Congress, and from the public. The result is a clear set of national goals. In support of these goals, my ambassadorship will be an open one that seeks to offer the people of South Africa a sense of partnership and a helping hand as they seek peace and national renewal. I believe that the American experience is not irrelevant to the situation in South Africa, different though our heritages are. Our nation was forged in a struggle against colonial rule. Many revolutions, the abolition of slavery, the establishment of the rights of labor, the extension of civil rights to all Americans, and the fight for women's rights, to name a few, have followed that revolution of 1776. Significantly, each of these struggles has been the occasion for a great debate that left our nation stronger and wiser, and with lessened fear of further change. In the course of these struggles, we've never lost sight of the possibility of unexpected greatness in humankind, or of the need to strive to compose our differences through negotiation and compromise. We have been rewarded by the advent of needed change in our society, in our politics, and in our economy. America has built on its diversity, often amid adverse conditions, to become great. America's hopes for South Africa are therefore based solidly on our national experience, which teaches us that even the seemingly impossible may in time be achieved by men and women of goodwill. That is why we dare to trust that peaceful change can come about in South Africa. Americans speak as we do about South Africa because we dare to dream that a country of such limitless economic potential and natural beauty can yet emerge as a society in which all its citizens participate equally in political and economic life. We envisage the emergence of a strong nation contributing to and benefiting from the well-being of its neighbors, its continent, and the community of nations at large. We do not express our intolerance of racial apartness because we lack sympathy and understanding for the terrible dilemmas confronted by the people of South Africa. Our country, too, contains minorities. We understand the anguish of South Africa's minorities over the prospect that their rights might be trampled on by an uncaring majority, and that their very identity might be jeopardized. At the same time, our history and our values cause us to be deeply in sympathy with the aspirations of South Africa's majority for justice and the right to be represented in their government. I've been asked what this assignment means to me as a Black American. I accepted the President's offer as an American, and as an American who believes that we should not stand as cheerleaders on the sidelines of the great issues of our times, but that we should have the courage to engage ourselves in them. I accepted this assignment as a Foreign Service officer who took an oath to go where needed, when needed. I accepted this assignment as the ambassador of the United States, as the ambassador of all Americans, and not as the ambassador of an American minority. I believe President Reagan chose me for this challenging assignment on this basis, that I am a foreign service officer who, by training and experience, can help him pursue American objectives in South Africa. And that as a Black American, as a member of a minority that was long oppressed, I might have a special empathy for both the minority and the majority in South Africa. Aware as I am of the significance of my appointment, I note that there are 37 Black Americans living who have carried or are carrying the baton of ambassador. 5 of these are on active duty. The overall implication of these 2 points is that Black Americans do, regardless of profession, have an important role to play in our efforts regarding South Africa and in our foreign policy in general. Mr. Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, I go to South Africa with no uncertainties about the rightness of our objectives and no illusions about the difficulty of our achieving them. I go with no trepidation regarding my own role. I go with the utmost of goodwill toward all South Africans. I go with the hope that my reporting and my advice will be helpful to the President and to you, Mr. Secretary, in understanding the evolving situation in South Africa and in charting the course ahead. I thank you very much.